Today, I'm welcoming back men's coach Ean Wood. In our conversation today, we're going to talk about how embodiment, stimulation, and sexuality work in towards men's work. Although the umbrella is around men's work for this conversation, it does stem out towards all genders, all sexualities, all recognitions, especially once we get towards stimulation and sexuality. It's a very beautiful, vulnerable conversation. Always grateful for Ian to be on. Hope you enjoy the conversation. We'll see you on the other side. But first, a message from our sponsor. Our healing journey can be difficult and might feel lonely at times. That's why I love sound baths. When we can get together in a community, we intrinsically support and feel supported by others. And that combined energy can help us go deeper into our own healing journeys. And all you have to do is just lay there for 1 hour and listen to beautiful healing sounds. I'm a sound healing practitioner, and I hold sound baths on a regular basis in the greater Seattle area. You can find my next sound baths on my website at adamrealhealing.com. That's Adam, A-D-A-M, Real, R-I-E-H-L, Healing, Healing.com. AdamRealHealing.com. Your healing is worth your time. And now an uninterrupted podcast with Ean Wood. All right, welcome back to the show. Today I'm joined by a past guest and good friend of mine named Ean Wood. Ian has transplanted himself from the beautiful Baja area of Mexico to North Carolina within the past little bit of time. So I'm really excited to catch back up with him and see what he's been up to now that he's moved to the East Coast. Men's work is what Ian kind of does on the big grand scale. But he loves, I love the passion that you have around all of the work that you do. It seems to revolve around men's work, but it also permeates from men's work out into community work, into, the love of the relationship of all these beautiful things. So kind of picking up where we left off in our last episode, which is episode 38. So about 50 episodes ago. And just kind of diving back into men's work. We're going to talk about embodiment, stimulation, and sexuality today. So if you've listened to the episode that just came out recently with Destiny, we talked a lot about sexuality and how pleasure can heal relationships. So this is a beautiful kind of segue transition into this conversation with Ian on more of a men-centric kind of understanding of how this work can manifest inside of us. So, Ian, thank you so much for being here, brother. I appreciate your time, appreciate your knowledge, all the way from the East Coast.
Grateful to be here.
Yeah.
And congratulations that you've done 50 episodes since the last time we were together.
Man, it's crazy, man. I'm at just under 100 right now. And that's
Wow.
when you start a project like this, you never know really how long it's going to go, but I'm just every episode that I put out, I'm so thankful for it. I'm thankful for the guests and thankful for the listeners, man. Thank you listeners for giving me somebody to talk to and putting these people on to communicate with.
How fun.
Yeah. So how's your journey up to the East
Yeah.
Coast been, man? You've been out there for about 6 months now?
Yeah, probably getting close to 6 months. I love that we're talking about men's work and you're asking me about it because it was pretty terrifying to come out here.
Mm.
I literally was living in Mexico, went and got my vehicle in Washington and drove 4,000 miles here where I at the time didn't know anyone.
Yeah.
And men's work was my crutch.
Mm.
Men's work and the men's community here held me. It was the only thing I had to hold me when I was scared.
Mm.
It was the only familiar thing I had. And it's such a beautiful thing. And I'm just so grateful to be starting the podcast with this. Is part of being in these men's groups, you can travel the world. I could travel the world right now.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's Mankind Project, Sacred Sons, whatever the men's group is, like this global network is just weaving and getting bigger and bigger. So I had that web here in Charleston, and the men here just took such good care of me. One of them rented me a car the first time I came out for like 3 months.
Wow.
Another man let me move in with him where we would have circle every week. He let me move in with him. He helped me in so many ways and we became really good friends. We'd go surfing and stuff. So I don't know that I mean, maybe I would, but I don't know that things would have worked out the way that it did without the men's community that I'm connected to, and the way that they just brought me in like a brother straight
Mm.
up.
Yeah. That's and that's so beautiful to be able to know that you're held in that kind of way when you're able to go to these different areas of the world, whether it's a neighboring state, similar country, all the way across the world, and be connected with these like-minded people that can hold you and keep you safe and help you on that journey that you're on. That's
Mm.
my fiance Monica started traveling when she was 18. Like, she had a rough childhood. She didn't do well in school, so she got an opportunity to travel her senior year and went to Europe for 2 months. And the amount of just so and she's been doing that for the rest of her life, right? So she's 37 now. She's traveled to 40 plus countries. She's all over the world. She's always traveling. But the beautiful thing about that is that everywhere in this world, she has a place to go. She has a place to stay. She has somebody that she knows that will help her, give her a car, take her to the airport, pick her up, whatever it is. But to have that security and to know that around the world there's somebody that's going to take care of you, or at least give you that landing space for you to get a start, there's a beautiful comfort in that knowledge once you've experienced that. And I think that teaches us too, like, how can I be that person for somebody? How can I hold that space? How can I share my knowledge, my wealth, my wisdom, whatever it is that I have an abundance of, with this person that just needs a little hand for now?
It's interesting because I've always been so social and group oriented.
Hmm.
Like growing up, I skateboarded and snowboarded. That was my thing. My friends were everything. My friends were everything. My guy friends were everything. I would I would choose my guy friends over my partner, like for sure,
Yeah.
all the time because they were that important to me. The last couple years, I haven't had that.
Mm.
Like I left, I really put myself in a cave
Yeah.
to transform and change. And it was the most introverted. I think it was in the collective consciousness too, because it was when COVID was going on. So I think it was in the collective, this kind of uh, introverted hermit kind of energy was in the air.
Hmm.
And I did it like I've never done anything like that in my whole life. I've never been so introverted by myself. That had like ripple effects on me, even in my human design and different. And I just know about myself. I'm a very social person,
Hmm.
but I had to do all this internal unraveling and peeling apart. So I got used to being on my own, like lone wolf for sure.
Yeah.
And it's been such an important path for me. And I think it's really helping me to understand other men because I think a lot of men go lone wolf and coming back into being social I'm going bowling tomorrow night. Like I set like a date to hang out with guys and go bowling
Yeah.
because it's like it's important for me to be social. I think that I think that's something that I'm learning and I know it's talked about with men like that it's so much like women are considered so much more relational and like to be with their friends. But I think that men need it too, but it's just maybe not as easy or not as natural. I don't know. Obviously, this is a large generalization,
Yeah.
but I'm just finding this beautiful path of going into isolation and coming back into the men's community and just really being like, I want friends. I want guys that I connect with and we go play and we go talk about deep things and we go do man things.
Right. Yeah. There's, it's funny you mentioned the COVID introvertedness, because I noticed that about myself too during that time. And it was funny because it was actually the opposite for me. Like, I've always, no, I shouldn't say always. I hate when I speak in absolutes. I'm really trying not to speak in absolutes anymore, like always and never, and I'm this or not that. But
Totally.
in my past, I've been okay with being introverted, and a lot. I accredit that a lot to the jobs I've had. I've had a lot of extroverted jobs where I've managed teams. I've worked in restaurants that had like, we would do $50,000 in sales in a day. We have just busy, busy, busy. I would see thousands of people a week. And it would drain me. So I would justify my introvertedness, go home, sit on the couch, drink my wine, shut the fuck off, right? And it wasn't until COVID that I realized how much I actually needed a community and how much I thrived in community settings. And it was the right community, right? So take the restaurant out of it. I don't need that drinking and, all that stuff that went along with that, my version of restaurants. But the community and the yoga community, I realized I missed. And so, like, I was doing a lot of meditation around that because I had made peace with being an introvert. I'm like, I'm cool with this, right? They have a person here or there. That's it. Don't need it. I'm good. But what I really found was, and this was hard for me to understand because, it goes back a long ways and it has me deal with a lot of the stuff that I'm not proud of as a human being. But when I was in my late teens, I started selling drugs, and I had a really good friend of mine that we went into quote unquote business together, and he was my guy. Like, I love him to death, and we were, that quote, ride or dies. We had each other's back, and for many years we were doing what we were doing. But there was a point where we were riding around one night, late night, one night in Houston, and ignorant kid shit. We got pulled over. I had weed on me, a considerable amount, and my buddy had a considerable more amount. And so he said, "Hey, give it to me. I'm going to take the fall for this." And he took all of it and he put it in his
Whoa.
pockets. And I mean, the cops had us there for hours, trying to get me to rat on him and vice versa and all this shit, tore the car apart, all this stuff. And my buddy went to jail for a little bit of time, and our relationship was never the same, right? Even though he
Whoa.
chose to take that route, and because he knew I had different plans. I was, planning on moving soon, all this fun stuff, or not fun stuff, but all these
Wow.
plans. So, and he was like, you know what, I'll take the fall, I'll do this. And shortly after that, my dad passed away, and my buddy, who was always there for me, didn't show up to the funeral, and that hurt me. And I didn't realize why it hurt me
Mm,
at the time, but through this
mm,
meditation and through all this playback in my head, what I've realized is that, like, the one friend that I could trust, the one friend that I loved, I broke that in a way, right? By letting
mm,
him take that fall for me, I abandoned his
mm,
friendship, and it wasn't the same. And so, like, subconsciously that fucked me up a lot, and I don't think I let people
mm,
close to me again for a very long
mm,
time, unless in a romantic way, because of that reason, because I didn't want to go through that pain of him, quote unquote, having the decision of taking the fall, and then having animosity in our friendship, and then having no friendship at all. Like, we're 40 years old now, just establishing communication again, but so
mm.
there's like a deep psychosis in a lot of this stuff with us, if we can really look back and say, like, where that damage has come from. And so now that I understand how that has manifested in my life and how that lands, I can look for that now and say, I don't need, well, one, I'm not doing ignorant kid shit anymore, so I don't have to have anybody take the fall for me anymore. So that's always a plus.
Yeah.
But I can start to release some of that pent up mistrust within myself, to allow trust into another human, another man, another friend to come in and kind of embrace that understanding and embrace that idea.
Mm,
But that's work,
yeah.
man. It took me a long time to get to that point, and I'm still, still wrestling with it a lot. I still, revert back to my introverted days and can be totally fine with that. But now I know that I need people like yourself, people like Cam, people, our brothers and our friends in our life that can be there for support for us. Let us know that we're not all on our own.
I think that there's a extra element to it, especially I would say choosing the path that isn't the norm.
Hmm.
You know, those of us that don't drink maybe at all, if very often, or just aren't into the things that are normal. Like, I don't really care about sports. I'll go watch them and like have fun with guys. There's all these guy things that I don't care about. So it like it does narrow the field a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think I was just like, I'm not gonna hang out with men unless they're on my level or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I'm like, it's interesting. I'm more on the path of like, what's the best thing I can create with different men that I connect with in some way.
Yeah.
If I'm sitting in a men's circle with some man, there's for sure ways that we can relate. Where in the past it's like I didn't really, I was just like I only want the best friends and nothing more. Like I'm not settling for anything. And now I'm at the point it's like, man, I just like I want to hang out with good men and talk about cool things and like constantly be learning through that process.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be, challenged by the friends that you have, and not just be placated to. I think there are a lot of times where our friends, at least myself in the past, have been afraid to, to tell a friend, what I feel the truth is, right? And, there's that old adage, don't use your truth as a sword. If I see a truth about you that maybe you might not recognize, it's maybe not my job to just take my sword of truth out and be like, hey, fucker, there you go, you've just been cut down by my truth. But finding a beautiful way to share, your version of that truth that you're seeing that maybe that person across from you isn't seeing, but doing it in a way that's helpful, not in a way that's like, hey, guess what, and let me show you what I see. It's a more of a helpful thing. Hey man, is this how you want to be represented? Is this the way that you feel that your emotions are best being talked about? But having a way to politely and respectfully challenge you as a human being. But that, I think there's a delicate balance with that too, because we're in an era right now where even just like the slightest disagreement might cause a huge rupture because we're in a place where we've not found ways to respectfully disagree anymore. If I disagree with you, we're done. You're canceled. You're out of my life. We can't talk anymore. But, if you disagree with me, one of the things I learned best about COVID right now, with this aftermath of COVID is how much you should listen to the people that don't share your opinion. You don't have to say, I believe you, but listen to what they have to say, because if it's differing than your opinion, why is it? See how that lands with you instead of just getting aggravated with the fact that they have a differing opinion and shut them out. And now your information is you're null and void. You could be the smartest human in the world, but because you told me to wear a mask and I don't think I should, get fucked. You have no information that I could take anymore. Right.
Right.
So I think there's that balance of getting back to a place to where we can receive constructive information in a way. And so creating those safe circles, creating men's circles, creating women's circles, allure groups, where these places are safe to explore our emotions, explore our thoughts without being damned for them. Right. I think that's a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. So I love that you're doing that out there and everywhere you go. I mean, it seems like that work just follows you. You find it where you need to find it.
Yeah, it's been going that way lately. I've
Yeah.
been enjoying that.
So with men's work, what kind of I don't know if scene is the right word out there, but I know that every kind of area of the world is focusing on something different. Like if I go to do sound bath down in Sedona, it's the sound equipment is different, the sound vibe is different. So what's like the vibe out in East Coast right now? Like what are you guys working on in your men's groups?
I only have a small window because I'm just sitting with the group of men that I'm sitting with. But what I pick up from this place is what I feel is that this soil is full of nutrients and it's like ready for a big blossoming.
Hmm.
But what I've noticed so far, and once again, this is just a small window, is that, and this is what I noticed in Mexico too, is the women are just so hungry
Hmm.
for the work
Yeah.
and like for the progression and the evolution. And there's this there's this space for men to really like I said blossom. So it's really what I feel here. The group I sit in is like 15 men usually,
Okay.
and I think half of them are new men, like not initiated in the Mankind Project. So I do see a bit of that blossoming. And then this is like one of the longest men's circles that it's like been around for 15 years within MKP. It's like one of the longest
Hmm.
consistently going men's circles. So there's there's these veterans, there's these older men that have been doing it for so long, and then there's just like all this new blood coming into the scene. And this goes a bit into another conversation that we were talking about, which is like, how I see men's work really evolving, but I still kind of see it in the phase that it's been in for a while, which is like that first stage that is, men, it's okay to feel your emotions, and this is how you do that, and let's practice.
Hmm.
But it's this like original, there's this phase that is so important. It's one of the first most important phases, which is, men, you need to feel your feelings.
Right.
That's, I've seen within the Mankind Project, that's a lot of where the men's work is like, you need to feel your feelings. It's a lot about feelings, expressing feelings, moving feelings,
Yeah.
and that's kind of similar here.
Yeah. The feeling side. So I participated in a few men's groups with Camo, on a series, and then some individual men's groups on like satellite kind of stuff. And to echo what you're saying, yeah, there's this big push about emotions, like feel your emotions, feel your anger, don't repress anymore, get that stuff out. But if I can share something about myself, I really appreciate the feeling of the emotions, because I am an emotional person that has learned to hold on to my emotions and not let them kind of be. But in mainly in like the let's say like crying or allowing sadness to be there, embracing the understanding of depression, not falling into depression, but understanding the message that depression sends. But the where I kind of get hung up, and I've tried, it just doesn't land with me, is the anger emotion. And so there's practices where stand in the middle of all these men and you like hit your chest and you're like, oh, I'm so angry. And I feel like I'm playing a part every time I do that. Like it doesn't feel natural. Like yes, I have anger. By no means am I saying I don't have anger, but I don't feel natural touting that anger and screaming and pounding my chest. It feels like a character that I'm playing to placate a situation, to play along.
Mm,
And
mm,
and when I'm done with it, um, I don't feel like negative about myself for playing that part, but
mm-hmm.
I don't feel like it's really benefiting me to be that person. And to be completely honest, now that I'm saying this, I think that aspect has kind of kept me away from some men's groups, because I don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel comfortable witnessing other men be that aggressive and that aggro. And I've worked in many places where there were bar fights and aggravation and you know fists being thrown and all this violence, that I'm kind of like, I'm cool with that. You guys, do your angry bear shit over there, and that's cool. But I'm gonna just be over here and meditate, because I think that's more landing for me. So, I don't know if you could speak to that, but there is that side of that to me.
Mm-hmm.
Just it doesn't land, and I'm not saying it shouldn't land with others, but
Right.
some people it does, some people it doesn't. But how do we traverse that in a men's group to where we can still be a part of that, but not you know not placate to it, I guess.
Right. Yeah, in the saying, there's this saying about women are allowed to cry and men are allowed to be angry. And
Yeah.
not even allowed is not the right word, but it's like that's where men are funneled towards anger. That's like acceptable or the normal to be a man and be angry
Mm-hmm.
than to be a woman and cry. That's like the old story.
Mm-hmm.
And such a potent topic. I could talk about anger for a long time for sure. Um, that's the that's definitely the emotion I grew up around
Okay.
with, like the masculine is angry, as like from my mom and my dad. When in masculine energy was anger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, it was easy to be angry, and the stretch was for me to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I the time I was in Mexico, I actually went really deep down the feminine path of like healing around feminine wounds
Mm-hmm.
and being in feminine containers with feminine teachers, going in deep kind of into the dampness, the wetness, the tears, the sadness, those denser emotions. I find myself coming back to this place of really valuing anger And I think everybody's path is different.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's path is unique, like we talked about earlier. That and I think that that's important that we showcase that in men's groups is someone it might be a stretch to be angry, and someone it might be a stretch to be sad, and someone it might be a stretch to go into their shame. Like everyone's got like a different, and I think what you feel and what is easy to feel into is the anger one's the one that is kind of goes to the most
Yeah.
because it's big, it's active, it can move a lot of energy. For me, what's been really important is changing my understanding of the energetics.
Mm-hmm.
So actually dismantling that label, which is anger, and starting to actually feel more into the energy. And this is actually my focus in what we're talking about bit today is like the fire that is in anger, the energetics are actually very close to the fire that's in passion,
Mm-hmm.
that's in sexuality.
Okay.
The fire is coming from a very similar place and can be felt in a similar way for me. So what I'm really learning on the path with anger is how can I emote or move that energy in a way that is healthy and constructive?
Mm.
Because usually when what usually happens with so many men is that anger's like the it's like the thing on the front of the boat breaking the iceberg.
Okay.
It's like breaking all this hardened stuff. And
Mm.
usually what happens, what comes after the anger is the sadness, is the shame, is the fear, is the whatever. So I think that yeah, it's a huge subject, but I've really come to revalue that inner fire as a training. Like you talked about truth as a sword,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this fiery energy is the sword work, sexuality, anger, passion, all these fiery energetics as men. This is our mastery with that sword because this is when we talk about masculine energy and testosterone, that combination is it's outward, it's active, and it is energetic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it's almost like you're alchemizing your perceived anger into a fuel to push a passion, right? And I love that
Yeah,
because like for me, and I noticed this with my partner with Monica, is she is so free and just open and creative and boisterous and all these things that I'm not, and I used to get upset down deep. I would look, she would have these conversations or be in these parties, and I would see how magnetized she was and all this stuff, and I would like kind of look at her and be like, man, just tone it down a little bit, like what the hell. But now I realize that bit of anger that I feel is jealousy, that she can be that free and that understanding, that open, without the story that goes along with that. At least in my head, externally looking out,
totally.
and so that that is that fuel now. But we have to get to a point to where we can quiet ourselves down enough to understand it's a message and not and not like this thing we get trapped in. And so but now like I see these things as Camo actually was on the show the other day and talked about reworking the word trigger into the word portal. So instead of being triggered to something,
That's the word I use.
oh, it's beautiful, man. That was just introduced to me, and I
Yeah,
love that. So having this portal open up inside of me to show me, like, hey,
totally.
man, you've just had something
Totally.
arise inside of you. Do you have a space to work on that? Right? Let's
Totally.
dig into that. And those aggravations, those anger points that I feel
Yeah,
are 99% of the time, and probably 100% if I really put my time into it, are something that I'm sad about myself for not being able to do or questioning myself of doing.
totally. I anger is the protective energy.
Mm,
It's the protector. So, when I'm angry or when I work with people with anger, I'm always like, what are you protecting?
mm,
Because the protecting might be the under emotion, the protecting might be what there's a fear there, but the anger is big and energetic in that way to protect
mm.
something. And it could be just a perception of something that it's protecting, but Um, I think ultimately the practice is, how are we comfortable with being in with every emotion?
Yeah.
That if I have discomfort with any of the emotions, that's going to set me up for weakness in some way. Or I won't say it's going to set me up for weakness. I'm not going to be at my potential. I'm not going to
Hmm.
be at my full potential if I have an imbalance with any of the emotions, because emotions can come and they're not mine. You know,
Yeah.
I could live the most zened out, peaceful life, and I'm still connected to the collective consciousness. I still am going to have to work with that emotion flowing through this energetic body.
Mm. Man, and that's something I'd, stepping into this healer realm and not calling myself a healer, but working with the healing arts,
Right.
holding men's
Right.
circles yourself, doing Reiki energy treatments. Like I've been warned, I'd been talked and trained about it, but until you feel the absorption of somebody else's energy into your own body in an unwelcomed way, that's when like, oh shit, this is real and I need to protect myself. Because when we put ourselves out into these big groups, last night I held a sound bath and had 30 people there. I have another 50-person sound bath tonight. That's a lot of
Wow.
energy that's being pushed at me as the practitioner, and me trying to fend off all this and understand it at the same time. When I'm done with my sound baths, it takes me at least 30 minutes to cleanse myself. Like, I'll sit, sage, use tuning forks, use rattles, sit with hape, but anything to get me back into my body and to clear that energy out, because it's amazing how much we take on without realizing it. So just think about the person that isn't tuned into whatever that is, right? Just thinks that they're their own body, they're their own emotions, but they're being constantly hit left and right with all of these exterior emotions. And it's like, why was I just triggered? Why am I upset now? Whereas before I was just happy. Well, what's around you? What kind of state of mind are the people around you? Are you protecting yourself from that energy as well?
Yeah, it's such a dance. It's a dance. And I think it's like in those areas that I think like a bit of what we're experiencing is when we open up, it's like energetically there's less separation.
Hmm.
So it actually becomes like when you're in these big sound baths, it's actually this becomes this whole soup where you guys aren't all as separate or rigid singular entities, but you actually become more of one soup, and all of the energies come together and like stimulate the frequencies in each of you. And so it's the thing that it's interesting, the thing that's worked for me the best in my path in men's work, because when I would go staff men's weekends, there's like 100 men doing insane, saying things they've never said in their whole life, doing deep work. And I would leave there just so screwed up for days
Yeah.
at the beginning, just like so screwed up. And what I found to help me the most were like Wim Hof cold plunges.
Oh yeah. Okay. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Just that kind of crash the body, stimulate the nervous system and
I think it was like, I don't know, it felt like the water, I don't know, something about the water just like taking that, it's like the water just, I don't know, cleansing that energy, taking it. It's just like, it's like almost like if you could bury yourself up to your neck in the dirt,
yeah.
just being immersed in this frequency that's just able to kind of put you back to square one, or
Yeah.
like a
Oh,
more grounded place.
there's a documentary on Gaia right now that's talking about I think it's called The Secret of Water. And it's talking about how water holds memory, and I've, peripherally, I've seen all these different experiments over the past, like, probably a couple decades about, how each emotion causes different types of tears to come out, so if you analyze the tears that come out of your eyes in a happy state, in
Whoa.
a sad state, in a grief state, they're all like molecularly different. And then there's experiments out there
Whoa.
that if you speak nicely to water and then freeze it versus if you speak negatively to
Yeah.
water and freeze it, and how it shards and all this stuff, right? So we know that water holds memory, like it holds information in there. And so, I would love to see, as the science continues, how something like a cold plunge and that intentional, like, so you're putting your intention into a healing of that water, and how that water is receiving that intention and then helping work with you to accomplish that intention, right?
Mm,
There's a beauty, there's a smartness to water that we probably will never understand. It carves out the most
yeah.
hard surfaces, but it's also the most gentle thing. It can be
Hmm.
hard, it could be soft, it could be steam, it can be gas, it could be all the different elements. So there's like this beautiful like wisdom, I think, to water that we're maybe we'll understand one day.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. It's like such a gift, something I try to be more and more thankful for.
Yeah, most definitely, man. So with that, I mean, it kind of works into the embodiment side of it, with getting back into our bodies, finding those ways to embody ourselves and not to, think about our body as just a meat suit that gets us from place A to place B, and every once in a while it needs to sleep just so it doesn't die. So like embodiment practices, getting into those extreme states, extreme hot, extreme cold, finding what the sensations in the body.
Mm,
I think a lot of us are in this instant gratification world where we just seek that gratification and then we're ready for the next thing. And then we're ready for the next. So I could be in the most peaceful place, but thinking about what I'm going to do next and not actually being embodied where I'm at and feeling the embracement of the healing modality that I've chosen.
totally.
Yeah. So with embodiment, how do you recommend for people, not just men, but people in general to get back into their bodies, to find a way to trust that understanding again?
Mm. I was thinking about this earlier, and this, what really came to me on my path, because men's work really was what blossomed my embodiment journey. It was a lot of the shadow work. It was a lot of the somatic stuff of
Mm.
like, all right, where do you feel that emotion in your body? I was like, what are you talking about? Where do I feel the emotion in my body? Like, what are you talking about? Like, that question was really a beginning origination of my journey into embodiment. And I think, especially in this day and age, the key to embodiment is slowing down. The
Yeah.
key to embodiment is it, what I've found over the years is like, I can't feel my body if my mind is going 100 miles an hour all the time.
Right.
If I'm constantly overstimulated by a phone, by a computer, by, just constant stimulation, my mind's always somewhere else. It's always imagining, it's always visualizing, it's always thinking about the future. How the hell am I going to feel my body? Like, I think this is a huge part of the masculine feminine imbalance is that being in the body is more feminine and being in the mind is more masculine.
Mm. Okay.
And so many, every gender is living is such a high percentage living only in the mind or a majority in the mind. Like everything's celebrated a productivity and this and this and that. Like so much of the mind is valued and celebrated. So
Mm.
for me, a huge part of it was just slowing down to have the bandwidth, and I'm still on the journey, slowing down to have the bandwidth to listen, to feel a subtle sensation. I know people that, and maybe you can, I don't know. Some people I think are gifted, more gifted and have had different paths. Like I was drinking and doing drugs like pain pills like for years. So I have a lot of numbing that I am working on reversing, but it's
Right.
like some people can like feel individual organs or like, you know, I'm pretty sure I have stories of like someone knowing the exact ovary they had cancer in or like the exact location of these things that they can feel in their body. Like I'm not there, no way, but
Right.
this it's an ability to feel a sensation is listening.
Mm.
It's not active,
Yeah.
it's receptive, it's feminine, it's receptive. It's like, can I feel this thing in my body? So honestly, what comes up for me for anyone that wants to be more embodied, yeah, do the somatic dance, do the breath work, do the movement stuff,
Hmm.
but ultimately is the mind has to slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a book called the Four Ways, I believe. It's an old Toltec. It's written in the idea of the Toltec tradition, And one of the things they talk about is 4 ways to look at the body to know your body's constitution and your body's health. And it's your ability to sing, your ability to dance, your ability to tell stories, and your ability to sit in meditation.
Hmm.
And that, I mean,
Wow.
just those 4 things, right? Can you sing? Can you use your voice, right? Can you be proud of the voice you have? Can you tell a compelling story, right? Can you catch people's attention and give them some knowledge, right? Are you cool with moving your body? Can you ecstatic dance and not feel ashamed about it, right? That's beautiful. And then can you sit in silence? And for
Hmm.
me, it's ecstatic dance,
Wow.
and that's the thing for me that I don't feel comfortable doing. Like I'm getting better about singing in public. I love telling stories. It's part of the thing that I love doing. You got to pull me off my meditation cushion. Like I could live there if I needed to. But dancing for me is that thing that's like, God, it's just fucking cringeworthy. But that's a good map for me to understand, where to start with my personal embodiment, with my feeling shameful about my body movements and not feeling that I have maybe a right to move my body in a free way. And so now, man, every morning for the past 2 weeks, I've woken up and I've ecstatic danced for 5 minutes roughly before my morning meditation. And I'm
Hell
trying
yeah,
my
dude.
damnedest. I'm so fucking trying to get past this part of me that doesn't feel comfortable about my humanity, express
Yeah.
the expression of my humanity. But,
Yeah.
but it's quieting, like you said, quieting down the body enough to listen to the messages that are being told to us. And can we do something about it once we find that message?
You said body, but I think you meant mind. Just
Yeah.
so just so the listeners know.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
But but this kind of goes back, brings up another point. Boredom, right? When we're bored,
God.
there's so many good things that happen from boredom, right? Our subconscious can finally start to noodle about some things that it's been noodling over, maybe jump an idea of that it's been noodling over that we're ready for the conscious mind to have. But if we're constantly filling our time with all of this stimuli, from TV to Netflix to, our screens, everything that we can do to not listen to our bodies, are we ever going to be quiet enough to hear those messages, right? So hear those, like, it's right before you go to bed, we have ideas. When we're in the shower, we have ideas. When we take a walk, we have ideas because we're not really focused on anything anymore. We allow that boredom to seep in and let the mind kind of noodle about it. So I think, part of that embodiment is, it kind of sounds counterintuitive, but build in some boredom in your life. Schedule boredom if you have to. Schedule
Yeah.
time to go sit outside and not have a phone, not have a screen, and just stare at a tree for an hour.
I mean, when that word, it's so interesting because that word has morphed so much for me. And when you said it, I was like, that is literally a word that points at addiction.
Wow. Yeah. It really is.
If someone's bored, it's literally pointing at where they have an addiction.
Mm,
It could be food, it could be entertainment, it could be it's that something is going on inside of them that they don't want to sit with. Like there's literally discomfort of not doing.
mm,
And so yeah, it was wild to hear the word because I don't think I've heard it or thought about it in a while. It's like, wow, that literally points towards I need to soothe myself.
right. That's a really interesting correlation. I never thought about that either. But it really is, when we're bored, the mind is like, well, what can I do to not be bored, right? Oh, I'm going to do this cocaine or I'm going to have this drink. I'm going to go stimulate my body and my mind in some kind of
Eat the
way.
sugar.
Right. Totally, man.
Yeah.
But can we just be bored? I mean, God, and I'm a victim of this. My kids are 18 and 14. My kids grew up in the tablet era, and for
Yeah.
all intents and purposes, hey, crying kid, we're in a restaurant. Here's a tablet. Just watch your thing. Please be quiet. We'll deal with this later. And now we're just in this place where everybody's overstimulated, and it's like
Totally.
I tell my 14-year-old all the time. She's like, I'm bored. I'm like, that's good. Lean into that. Like, be bored, be okay with that. Figure out how to be bored and embrace that because your day is very packed. Like, she's a 14-year-old child. She's in high school. She's got like so many things, extracurriculars. She's got the homework, the school, all this shit. Be fucking bored. Take 2 hours out of your day to have nothing to do and be okay with that shit. Because when you're 40, you're going to pray you had that 2 hours a day to not do shit.
Yeah, gosh, I feel like we could do a whole podcast on boredom.
Yeah.
Um, it's so interesting because it's it's one's ability to be not doing and content and present is an exact representation of how much they're actually living their own life.
Mm,
Because if I can't just sit and be and like be good with that and excited and like, oh, wow, all right, I'm here
yeah.
and I'm here. It's like no matter what they're doing, their mind's doing the same thing. Even, someone like me was like an extreme sport nut. I think a big part of it was like when you're like could die, your mind like really sharpens.
Yeah.
But it's still like as soon as it's over, it's like that addictive cycle. It- I can't be dropping in on snowboard lines that I'm feel like I could die on every single moment of my entire life.
Right.
Like it's just not possible. And every time I get to the bottom, if I'm like, wow, now I'm bored and I don't feel good about life, I am not going to be set up for success for any other aspect of my life. And that's like an extreme version, but I think that's kind of points at what's going on so much is like always, and here we're getting stimulated is like always stimulated.
Yeah.
Have to have stimulation all the time to not feel what's going on inside of me. I love Michael Singer so much as a teacher because he's always like, it's a mess inside. And you need to work on that mess or it's going to be everywhere that you go.
Yeah. Wow. And if you think about stimulation in the sense of like if we have prolonged stimulation, right? So think about if you've had like, an energetic medicine experience, right? Whether it's like ayahuasca, MDMA, 5-MeO, like all these energetic medicines that bring us to a point, this uplifted state. And if you've been in a stimulated state of like, like an orgasmic state, if you will, for more than like a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, that's intense. And like, you're ready for it to be done. Right. And so living in that elevated stimulus, when you have that put in front of you, because like what you're talking about is like, okay, I dropped in, I was stimulated, I did the run, now I'm not stimulated. Okay, I'm going to go back and stimulate myself again and go through this again. So this is constant cycle. But when you reach that level of stimulation and there's no dip in it, you're just there at that peak orgasmic state for prolonged time, you're ready to be fucking done. And those are those lessons that I've learned the hard way, that it's not good to be stimulated all the time. Like your nervous system can't handle it, your body can't handle it, your brain is like, okay, we're ready to be done now. Okay, my toes are curled enough, like we could be done. But I think I've had to have those moments to appreciate the boredom and to appreciate that lower, energetic level, if you will, not lower in the sense of like down and negative, but
Right.
just
Right.
not as high up there, to be able to think clearly and to be able to appreciate, this state of equanimity that I'm in.
Mm,
Yeah.
love that word.
Yeah, right. So I don't know if that lands with you at all, with the stimulation side, because I think,
Totally.
we're always seeking that stimulation, but if you can actually find it and then find the prolonged version of that stimulation, it's really not what we want.
And what comes up for me when you share that is my ability to be with subtle stimulation is really the work to stretch my capacity to be with exuberant stimulation.
Mm,
Nobody, people have such blessed, gifted lives, and so many are living in hell.
right.
It's like this is this has become part of my practice is like what what aspects, like what subtle gifts can I be grateful for? Like, can I be grateful that my hand moves?
Mm,
Not everyone has a right hand that moves.
right. Yeah.
Can I be grateful for this subtle stimulation that can scratch my eye, can rub my ear? And it's like that's something that I really went down a deep rabbit hole is like we cannot receive in a single moment what's going on.
Hmm.
Like the amount of stimulation that's going on. Like I would go sit down and watch a sunset and I was trying to receive it as much as I could, like to open up.
Yeah.
It's like I can't receive that. I can't receive being on this freaking rock floating through infinite outer space, corkscrewing around this sun 93 million miles away as it sets over this ocean that doesn't exist anywhere else. Like it's impossible for me to like fully receive that level of stimulation.
Right.
And so many people, I mean, the amount of people living lives that no human being has ever lived before, as far as like, oh, let me eat my little fig from across the world and my little nut from Brazil and drink on my little drink that comes from like five different countries. And like, it's just like we all have these king and queen and lives. And so many people are just like dissatisfied as fuck.
Yeah.
And I'm really starting to find like this to be my path is like how can I enjoy the subtlest things
Hmm.
at any moment? And this is what people are being robbed of when they are constantly stimulated is they can't be with the slightest stimulation and therefore they can't receive the amount of stimulation that they're experiencing. They're always disassociating or running away from it
Hmm.
or in some way detaching from it because their body isn't physically able to receive that amount of stimulation all the time.
Yeah.
Obviously generalizing again.
But I mean, that's a very true statement. There's a Buddhist meditation that my meditation mentor taught me a while back, and it was kind of to focus on that gratitude for the subtle, And by no means is our breath subtle. Our breath is our life force, but it's a subtle sensation, right? And
Right.
so the idea is you sit in your meditation, and for each inhale, you thank that breath for giving you life, and on the exhale,
Love that.
you thank that breath because you're not expecting another breath to come in. You said, "Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
so appreciative of the life that I just had."
Exactly,
And then you
dude.
inhale and you're like, "Oh my
Exactly.
God, hey, there's another breath. Hey, look at me. I'm live again." And then you let that
What a
breath go and it's like,
gift.
"Hey, thanks for that gift. Appreciate it. Hey, look at me. I'm breathing again." Right? And you just do that over and over again. There's no expectation of that new breath to come in, but whenever it does, you're like, "Hey, guess what? I'm alive again." And now I'm in that timeline. I mean, if you think about it, every time we exhale, we're on a timeline roughly of 2 minutes before we can inhale again and live. And if we don't inhale within that 2 minutes, we die. So every
Totally.
exhale that we take, we're on a timeline until that next breath comes in. Right. And so
Yeah.
like that's the scientific side of it. But the meditation side of it is just appreciating it for what it is.
And a lot of what we're talking about being overstimulated is so many people are living in survival.
Mm,
Like their body is actually living in a state of constant
right.
survival, the way that the body is operating and the way that their breath's operating, the way that their blood is flowing, the way that their heart is pumping is in a survival active state, sympathetic. And and so often the program story I think so many people exist with is that like life is dangerous and I always got to be looking out for the next thing to get me and I always got to be one step ahead to like survive. Like that energy is really strong in the collective
Mm-hmm.
and the breath and that subtle sensation and what you're sharing is like this constant reminder that every breath is a representation of how much life loves and supports us.
Love that. Love that.
It's just like it's like rewriting this story that is life is so dangerous and I got to work so hard and like oh my God, life is, this kind of like animalistic view. But it's like, how many breaths do you think you've taken in your life that life just provided you that air? You didn't do anything for that air.
Uh-huh.
Like every single one of those breaths was a representation of how much life loves you and cares about you and is supporting you. And that's
Mm.
just one small example.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And we can see that the life is working for us and not against us. Like there's that it's that subtle knowing. There's the idea of viruses have been very popular in the talking about since COVID and all that shit. And viruses are bad. We should kill all the viruses. Bacteria,
Totally.
99% killing viruses, fucking soap and all this shit. But some of the truths that, some of the doctors that I listen to talk about is like if viruses wanted us dead, we'd be fucking dead. There's trillions and trillions of viruses out there. And there's, a handful of billion of us, right? If we wanted to be wiped out and viruses wanted to do it, they could fucking do it. But what viruses do is it's basically bacteria with a protein that carries information. And as that information comes into your body chooses what to do with that information. Maybe it self selects to say, hey, guess what? We're not going to take this information. This information doesn't fit with us. So we're actually going to take it in and it's going to allow the body to decay and die and then be reborn in a stronger version so that we could carry that new information down the road. Right. So there's like this demonization of all this
Dude.
stuff that we just don't really understand.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And once again, it coming back really to living this life as a human, and there's so much more to experience outside of our thought. But it's just like the whole boredom thing, the whole like there's just so many aspects that it's kind of like this, it's the path of least resistance, which is to be overstimulated and think a bunch
Hmm.
in the world today. But it's so easy to look at, it's not the way, it's
Yeah.
not working. Like so many people are on medications and problems and uh, uh, incoherence in the bodies and disease, and just like there's such ancient wisdom that, and now science is backing of just like the importance of being the leader of this mind, not the opposite.
Right. Right. It's interesting now because I mean, not only are naturopaths and holistic healers, but now medical doctors with the litany of alphabet letters after their names and the white coats are now prescribing meditation as as a prescription, like as a medicine. Like you need to sit down and meditate. And this is like, your Primera fucking Blue Cross Blue Shield doctor, right? Not your local apothecary. This is like, so whatever weight you put into whatever person you take information from. But like it's something that's very interesting now that this is being prescribed as you need to listen to your body. You need to slow down. You need to unstimulate yourself and be here in this moment. And I'm interested to see like what more of these practices are getting prescribed, like breath work, right? Okay, you need to do some work. You're afraid to take hallucinogens. That's fine. I understand that. Holotropic breath work. Let's hyperventilate for 90 minutes and see where that takes you, right? Because that's going to be a fucking experience that you never thought you'd have. I was just having that conversation with somebody the other day about that. So there's all these beautiful techniques, these somatic techniques that we now know to up and down regulate our nervous system to get us in and out of these states of mind. But are we into a point to where we can start prescribing these, start sharing these? Like yourself, when we first talked on our first episode, you were, in my opinion, you were lucky enough to be kind of raised in the idea of men's work as being something that is on the forefront of your being. That was beautiful that your dad kind of brought you through that and you had that upbringing. So you have that mentality going into it. But for a lot of us, we didn't have that. For me, when I finally started to learn about yoga and breath, I had to search for this stuff, to find out like the modalities and the things that work now. That one of the reasons I started this podcast was to put this stuff out there, so I think hopefully we're getting to a point to where this can start to become regular. I don't know if curriculum is the right word if we're teaching this in schools, but maybe it's something that parents are now starting to dial into their children a little bit more as they're reparenting themselves and finding this modalities that work for them. Are we sharing that now with our kids so that these kids can be, a little bit better set up to figure this out instead of being 40 years old and not knowing how to breathe right, you know?
Yeah, it's so wild to watch because it's like these little devices like are causing so many problems, but they're also like such a key to massive change.
Yeah.
Like these little devices have the potential to topple down those that are in power and kind of puppeteering the way that things are. Like people, it has the power to, because it's, really this realm of social media is energetics.
Right.
Like people can teach anything there. I mean, the stuff that's taught on social media these days is like, it's insane.
Yeah.
Some of the things I like listened to, I'm like, how can I just listen to this for free on my couch?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's like, it's crazy because we're definitely gonna deal with the ripple effect, which is like there's definitely gonna be impatience for there's gonna be impatience like they have for drug addicts right now for stimulation for sure.
Right.
Like that's gonna exist and it's gonna be an insane withdrawal, like maybe worse than drugs.
Right. Yeah.
And at the same time it has the power to really change the tides, which is this game that humans have been led to play for so long, which is valuing the external world over the internal. It's just like
Yeah.
not working anymore.
No, no, it's not, and there's, I think we have to understand sometimes that it's not necessarily the delivery system that's broken. Like let's take fast food, for example, right? So fast food is, ideally it's pretty shitty for the body. It's not really the most healthy. It's usually really inexpensive, but it's everywhere, right? It's in every big city, little city. It's on the corners. It's all over the place. So like we understand that we have now the ability to get food all over the world, all over these countries in a very speedy kind of way, in a very efficient way. Now, we'll take supply chain issues out of it for the recent COVID shit, but just
Yeah,
understanding, right? So the idea of fast food works. It's the delivery of what we're putting out there that's shitty, right? So if we take
right,
the
right,
understanding that fast food is now a structure and it's now it's got footprints in all these places, now we just improve the food quality. Right now, we're just putting better food into these areas, right? So now that your fast food is also fast, but it's nutritious, right?
yeah,
So it's not like the
totally,
the tool is a broken tool; it's just being
right,
misused. Like
right,
take
right, right,
advertising also. Advertising, we
totally.
know
Oh
like
my gosh,
advertising was
yes,
written by Sigmund Freud's cousin, right? The original book on advertising, how to like work with the brain, how to understand how to trigger the brain to want these things was written by Sigmund Freud's cousin, right? And so like there's a big psychological aspect of advertising, right? We know how to pull at the heartstrings to make people buy shitty sugary sodas that'll give you cancer and die. Well, buy all these things that you'll throw away in a week because you'll realize you don't need them. So we have this roadmap, this tool of reaching the human, of pulling on their heartstrings, of working with their psyche.
totally,
Can we
totally,
do it to encourage happiness? Can we do it to encourage altruism? Can we do it to encourage boredom? Or do we have to always sell this thing that's going to make this person money and then kill everybody else? Right. So the
right,
tools are out there. We're just fucking using them wrong.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The infrastructure is there.
Right. Totally, man. It's like we just got to
The
figure it out. So like the phone we know is addictive. We know, the damages that it's causing to our brain. But there could be a beautiful use for this device because it's now putting information in all of our hands. So looking at the way it can change government, can we now vote from our phones from a secure line, or can we defer that vote to our congressperson? Right? There's ways that we can utilize these devices in a better way. We're just kind of stuck in this like, hey, guess what? I got a new toy. Let's play with this toy. You want to look at some porn? Want to listen to some music? All right, well,
Totally.
cool. Once we're done with that stimulation, how are we actually going to use the toy? Right?
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's the things that make us human leave us susceptible to the problems we're finding ourselves in. But it's like I see this really important journey ahead, which is like reclaiming what makes us human.
Hmm.
But it's like so many of these attributes that make us human leave us susceptible to the sugar, to the phone, to all these different things that have become a part of everyday life.
Yeah.
And it's like the rails are really going in a crazy direction. It's like a lot of that is just what comes from what makes us human and the way that chemicals and hormones and information is put into our body through our mouths, through our eyes, through our ears.
Yeah.
And there's also this like we also need to really rest on the other aspects of what make us human and really flexing that muscle and getting connected to the higher consciousness that is like just here to witness this funny human experience.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a, it's almost like we have to find all the toys to distract us to realize we don't need the toys anymore. You know,
Right.
it's how much stimulus can we take in to realize that we're stimulated enough. I can't remember the therapist that I listened to, but I think it might have been Nicole LaPera. But she was talking about how when we're born with the perfect amount of joy and happiness in our lives. We get all of it, right? But as we get older, we think we have to add to it to stay joyful and happy. So we keep piling things on, and the idea that she's had is like putting things over your heart. So you're kind of like, you get a house, you get a car, you get kids, you get all these things. You think you have to keep adding to, and then you feel this pressure of like all this weight on your chest of like, what the hell is going on? But as you start to peel that stuff away, you feel the lightness come back and you feel the joy, the true pure joy, because that's what we were born with. We don't need external. We have it all within us. So
Mm.
learning to embrace that, and learning to, if you need a car, great, get a car, right? Does it have to be like the top of the line car with all the leather and the air conditioning and the power shits? And no, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it can just be like a manual four-wheel drive car that gets you from point A to point B that kind of has a miscolored matched doors, right? Who fucking cares, right? Be you, right? But when we're constantly trying to uplift ourselves to this level that nobody's going to reach, because even the people that have quote unquote reached it are miserable as shit, right? Why are we continuously climbing this ladder or piling this stuff on? We sit down and we find these peaceful practices. We finally find somebody, like a group of people, that will accept us as the emotional, beings that we are, and then we can finally realize that maybe I don't need this, maybe I don't need that, maybe I don't need this. I'm the happy person, I'm the joyful person right underneath all this shit.
Mm.
But the stimulation kind of has to go away to get there.
It's just a game of energy, you know? It's just a game of energetics and I think where science is really getting to now and the technology and all these things will hopefully soon enough point us back towards a natural symbiotic like present grounded way of existing because yeah, I mean, I think there really is. I really do believe there's an opportunity, and it exists is existing already. Is like there's so much place to just really have this beautiful planet where, I think humans are just we're here to be stewards of such a magical place,
Yeah.
and we've lost sight of that. It's like this is the coolest place to live that we know of.
Yeah.
And as far as we can see, this is the most magical, magical, magical place of as far as we can see. And how do we just enjoy it, take care of it, and share it with one another because it's such a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we're swinging back that way, that understanding that we are one, we are with this world. We're not, directing the world, we're part of the world. Well, that's a conversation I had a while back. We were talking about definitions and nature, and there's a definition. I think it's in the Webster's dictionary. The definition of nature is basically, I'll paraphrase, but it's saying anything that is created outside of man is nature. So basically, the definition of nature is excluding humans as being part of it. So nature is anything created outside of man. And that's bullshit,
Mm,
right? We are nature. We're fucking descendants of nature. Like, we've evolved through
we
nature.
are
We are
nature.
nature. I'm fucking made of hummingbird feathers and orange peel rides and
Yeah,
stardust and shit, right?
totally.
I'm fucking
All the
nature.
food we,
Right?
yeah,
So I mean, even in our definition of it, we separate ourselves from it. So subconsciously we're pretty far away from that understanding that no, I am that tree just as much as that tree is me.
totally. It's like that is the great remembrance is like we are literally this planet experiencing itself. We are a mixture of this planet and like God consciousness
Yeah.
mixed together, experiencing itself.
Well, that's a fucking statement.
And it's like, and
Wow.
here we are having these like, wars and all this stupid shit. And it's like, we are literally like every molecule of us is made from the contents of this planet, which is like, I mean, I'll say Michael Singer again. His latest book is just out of this world, so good.
Mm,
Living Untethered,
okay.
and he explains it so well, left brain to like to God, from from science to God. It's just like, this is what's going on. This is all the way down to like the matter,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like our whole bodies are comprised of the elements of this planet that are comprised of like the elements of past stars. And it's just like, here we are fucking mad about traffic when we're like the incarnation of some crazy consciousness of that's created it all,
Mm-hmm.
mixed with like this wild fucking planet that is like can't be found anywhere else.
Yeah.
And we're like eating lollipops and throwing fucking wrappers on the ground and driving in traffic and
Uh-huh.
yelling.
That seems pretty ridiculous when you put it like that. Oh man, I love that perspective. I fucking love that perspective, man. It's when we I had a spiritual mentor tell me one time. She's like, "We're all magical. We're all gods. We just forgot how
Dude,
magical we are, and we're just shitty gods.
serious.
Like we can create, we can
Seriously.
destroy, we can do all this stuff, and we're just like, meh, whatever." It's lost its luster on us. Like, no, man, embrace your magic. The goddamn national animal of Scotland is a unicorn. Like, if that doesn't show you that that is fucking magical shit, then goddamn it, man, it's a goddamn unicorn is their national animal. There is magic in this world we've just forgotten. So I got a question for you. All right, so we've been talking about stimulation, we've been talking about embodiment, and in a way, what kind of came to me while we were talking about this is, we're so stimulated in this world now, and we seek it. Is sexuality kind of falling by the wayside because we're
Oh
all
gosh.
externally stimulated, and now we're not like
Dude.
to be? I mean, for a long time, I was addicted to porn, and my sexual stimulation came from pornography, even though I had a partner at the time. And so, and that's just my journey, but do you feel like we're getting to a point that we're so stimulated that even sex is now like, meh, whatever. Yeah, we can do it, we can not do it.
Wow. I love the way that we got here. Um, so I'm gonna speak most directly to people born male,
Okay.
men that are, cis men, biological males. Um, just to clarify that.
Hmm.
Um, I believe that for us, survival and sexuality stimulate us in the same, like on the same level of like loudness,
Okay.
because men, this species has been implanted with in different ways, the ways that our bodies function, the ways that our minds have developed, to like, the first thing is procreation.
Right.
Because like, what's the point of a species that doesn't keep procreating? It just dies off.
Right. Exactly. Got to
So
keep the
that's
species
very
going.
embedded in us. So survival is really important to live,
Hmm.
to get to the point where you can procreate. Procreation is, I think, similarly on the same level of stimulation, or the same way that it overdrives our mind and body, because men can actually have kids after they die.
Oh yeah, I guess you can, huh?
Women can't do that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Men can impregnate a woman and die within those 9 months, and a child can still be born.
Hmm. Okay.
So I believe, and just look at the way men behave around sexuality, It's like, look at the numbers around porn, look at like the percentages that are men.
Hmm.
It's it's not that something's wrong with men, it's the way we're hardwired.
Right.
It's the way that our brains and bodies function. We want to like make it such a thing of like, oh, and then that breaks it down to each individual man, like, oh, you're so bad. And it's like, no, it's the way we're hardwired.
Right.
Like, it's just so like getting to this is really why I've got like life has led me in this direction, is that okay, like we talked about with boredom
Hmm.
and stimulation for men, arousal is no longer about the body being aroused. It's about the mind being aroused
Okay.
in the level of stimulation that we're at right now. Um, in the same way that we're talking, that I talked about earlier about embodiment, that I can be aroused by something super subtle.
Mm.
That I don't need to watch some like crazy porno that's like so stimulating and so taboo
Right.
that it jacks up my mind enough to get me turned on to my body. It's like this massive stimulation needed in order to actually function in that way for so many.
Right.
And I mean, this can be seen in like, there's like 20-year-olds that are getting Viagra these days.
Yeah, totally. Yep. And they've even rebranded Viagra to something more like catchy and trendy and stuff. I'm like, dude, there's no need for that unless you like really can't get it up.
And I truly believe that this is pointing at overstimulation and disembodiment.
Mm.
People can't live in their bodies because there's too much trauma and stored energy they haven't dealt with.
Right.
And they've moved to living above the neck. So it's actually about up here.
Hmm.
And so the pleasure is very briefly for the body, but it's most importantly for the mind.
Okay.
And it's also a mechanism of people living, especially I'll say men, males again, living so overstimulated. What's the best way to hit reboot? The best way for this body to hit reboot or shut down
Hmm.
is to release, to have an orgasm.
Mm. Okay.
It's a it's like a robot, like,
Yeah.
and it's briefer and briefer, I think, over time because the levels of, right after I get that, I turn down. Oh, I pick this thing back up. I get stimulation again.
Totally.
Pick up my phone. I get stimulated again. I go instantly back into stimulation. But I really see it as this mechanism of turning myself, like turning off the switch for a second,
Yeah.
even if it's just for a second. There's no, the only other ways are alcohol and drugs,
Right.
which are just as popular.
Yeah.
But it's like these are the ways in which people that are so highly overstimulated and their minds are going all the time, stress, anxiety, worry. Da, da, da. It's like no wonder the soothing mechanisms are so popular. No
Right.
wonder alcohol's so huge. No wonder weed's so huge. No wonder like all the ways that a lot of people soothe are so popular,
Yeah.
or orgasm. It's like it's a way to turn
Yeah.
the stimulation down.
Interesting.
And I think for me, because I've been on this path for a long time in all these ways, and I think that sexuality is one of the most powerful ways to work with stimulation and to like, I think it's one of the most powerful tools for personal development,
Yeah.
honestly, because it is so sensational.
Yeah.
It's a powerful tool because it's so sensational.
Yeah. There's a woman that I've had on a couple times, and she's uses sexuality as a part of her therapy, and the amount of stories that we create around sexuality. I think is one of those things that we need to put a little bit more light on, because we put a lot of shame around sexuality. We it just
Jeez.
in stereotypical sense, we demonize the woman, the woman recognizing as a woman for having a lot of sex and call her a whore, but we grandize the man and be like, hey, you're awesome, look at you, you're a player, you got all these women, right? And so there's these rough stereotypes around sexuality. Um, Even growing up in the 80s and 90s where I grew up, there's a huge, it's gotten better, we're still working on it, but there's a huge negative understanding about homosexuality, and
Totally.
not being a heterosexual recognizing male or female, and now we're
Hmm.
getting past all that stuff. We're opening the understanding of that, but there's still, there's these stories that we've ingrained ourselves in. And I think
Hmm.
the unraveling of those stories, and kind of like you were talking about earlier, we are wired biologically differently, between men and women. And so, men might be a little more attracted towards that stimulation, right? But are we so, and this is the question I ask myself a lot now, is the act that I'm doing really that bad, or is it the story that I've created around that act that is really fucking me up? Because to be completely fair, like, I have no issues with anybody watching like a pornographic scene that's not hurting anybody. Everybody's like, signed up to do it, nobody's being held
Yeah.
against their will. But,
Right.
having that stimulation, that's great. That helps a lot of couples in some kind of way, to see somebody else having sex and be like, oh, well, that's just turned me on. Now I'm ready to have sex. So there's definitely
Right.
a place for it, but are we now creating a story of negativity around that because of the
Right.
societal constraints or because of our past actions or whatever it is? So, is it more the act of the thing, or is it the story that we created around the act that really fucks us up? And that's the work that I've been working on for myself.
I think it's been very purposeful the way that it's been demonized. I think it's been very purposeful because I think that it's actually one of the most potent and powerful ways to connect to like the higher consciousness.
Right.
And yeah, I'm finding it for myself as like it fits perfectly with breath work, with embodiment, with meditation. It's it's a tool that fits in so perfectly with all those things
Right.
to be more connected to yourself, to be silent minded and connect to God. I'll say God or the universe or the divine.
Right.
It's for me becomes something that's like, I don't think, I do not think at all in in my practice in that way. It's like I am fully embodied. I am fully present. It's maybe my most powerful meditation right now.
Right.
And I think that, I mean, if you look back at, in Egypt and stuff, it was treated that way.
Right.
It was treated as like this religious, spiritual thing. And I mean, there's books written about it. There's many ideas behind it, and I don't really care to like get into it or like, really learn that myself. It's just like I know, I know that it's for one, it's loving.
Mm-hmm.
It's loving. It can be loving. It can be connecting. It can be kind. It can be like opening. It can be all these things that are all uh, definitions of healing
Right.
or expansion or growth.
Yeah. There's a book, it's written in the 90s called The Fifth Sacred Thing. Um, Fantastic book. She ended up, I think there was a couple, like, I think it ended up being a series, but the book is fantastic. But there's the premise of the book is trying to find a way in a dystopian type world to have the rebels, um, basically, so you have the overarching, like, the lords that have taken over the world and that have all control of the water and all the resources, and then you have all these rebels that kind of live in these outlier areas. And the idea is that the rebels are trying to quote unquote win, right? But without force. They're not trying to like go in and say, hey, we have a bigger army than you, so just by default we win, right? So, but they're trying to say, hey, like their moniker is there's a place at our table for you, right? You can come sit at our table at any point in time, right? But part of the substructure of the book, it talks about how we need to embrace the emotions and the full human emotional spectrum, and so they have what they call these sex temples. I think they call them love temples, and they're set up for men and women to go and explore their sexuality unabashed, right? To find true understandings of love, of support, of nurturing, right? But the way that they use these throughout the books is that as people start coming over from the lordship side and start being swayed over, all these kind of mindless zombies that have been just raised to be in wars, the initial part of their therapy is to take them to these love areas, these sexual areas, and to reintroduce love to them through sex and through pleasure. And the
Hmm.
way that they talk about it and the way that they embrace that idea is so fucking beautiful. And so I started doing some research on that, and apparently the Romans used to do that back in the Roman days before, like they would go off and have their conquests and do all their shit, but they would stop at these brothels before they came back home so they could get that sexual energy out. They could be, that primal kind of, mutualistic kind of understanding, but then go back to their families a little bit more rested, a little bit more prepared, and not
Yeah.
straight from that war, that violence into their home life again. So there was almost like a buffer to get some of that energy out before they went back to their houses. So like sex has been used in a lot of ways, in
It's
these
so
beautiful ways,
profound.
to help us
So
understand our
profound.
emotions. I really would love to get to a point to where, if I feel depressed or I feel anxious or I feel like I just need to be loved, I could find a place that's safe, that is embracing and explore that sexuality that we all really need to explore in a way, but not feel demonized by it and not feel like I'm doing something wrong, Because sometimes, like, our sexual partners might not be the person that could be the person that can hold that space for us. And I'm not saying, we should live a polygamous life, but, again, we've
Right.
been raised in these different ways. Like I
Right.
was raised in the 80s and 90s where we were monogamistic. I had one
Yeah.
partner and that's it. So it's kind of expanding the ideas of what sexuality can be. And again, kind of taking the stories away from it and letting it be the beautiful experience that it is.
And it's like we started out, it's like the path of men's work is it's different for everyone. And someone else's medicine is different than someone else's medicine, but there is profound medicine available with that path.
Yeah.
Profound. I mean, I am where I'm at with this subject because of my experience with it in men's work. And any time that we opened the door to the conversation about sexuality, it was like I would always hear at least one, and most of the time, multiple people that said, I've never told anyone that in my whole life.
Yeah.
And what I believe is that there it is the place that holds the most shadow, or it's the place that it's the place of the most unconscious, like wounding or energetics or things that haven't been looked at or dealt with. Like the most unconsciousness exists in that realm.
Right.
And what that means is the greatest opportunity to find the hidden gold and healing and like gifts and beauty and power. It's like it's all waiting there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just like sound, like sound is really coming up and all these different modalities of healing are really blossoming. This is one too that's on the rise right now, that there's so much healing available and there's just so much expansion and growth available to uh really change things.
Yeah. Yeah. The person I talked about earlier in Destiny, but her practice and seeing and hearing about all these different practitioners that are starting to flourish around sexual healing, around sensual healing, and just the understanding of pleasure as being a beautiful emotion that has a lot of information that can help us. I think we need to, and I think it's interesting because it allows me to look at the things that we quote unquote demonize now in a different light, is saying like, well, is that really a bad thing? Are we approaching it in a different way? Can we approach it in a different way and let it be a good thing? There's a lot of that opportunity for us to look at that once we find something that kind of glaringly absorbs that light. So are we in a place to where we can respectfully usher in divine sexuality, and
Totally.
really embrace that as something that we raise our kids with, and saying like, yes, we're sexual beings, be safe about it, but explore it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's an important part of vital health.
yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Like it moves energy. That's what I've found is that it moves energy like nothing else. And it understanding it and working with it is I see it rippling out into my external world. Like I have more energy to create.
Yeah.
I have more energy to do. I have more passion. I have more ideas flowing through. I have more desire to take on more clients. I have clients just coming in. I have like this different stuff that happens as I connect and build and move and work with this energy. As it's a practice for me, it's a practice. I think more that I'm more committed to than yoga or
Mm.
anything.
Wow.
It's like my practice that I've picked that is like my energetic work and my healing. And for me, it's like the thing about it that's so potent is it's a journey every single person can do with themselves,
Right.
like
Yes.
can receive the teachings and take it to the practice with themselves. And I think in all the different things you can do that, but in this way it's like I don't know, there's just something about it that's special.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful, and I think when we can get to a point to where we can embrace that self pleasure, and not be, because I grew up with two brothers, like there was a lot of masturbating going on in our house, whether we knew it or not, right? But it was always, not saying that we should just do it in open, but like there's such a taboo around it, that it has to be secretive, it has to be like doors locked, windows shut, nobody's home, all this like ritual around the
So
secretive
weird,
of,
dude.
you're
It's
right,
so weird.
and it's like, why not just, rub one out in the shower, wake up and be like, oh, hey, how's it
It's
going? And not feel emotionally like, sad about it, or like you've done something wrong, or, something of that nature, some story around it, but just being like, that felt great. Now I'm going to start my
and
Tuesday.
imagine the pendulum swinging all the way the other way. That is like this is fucking sacred.
Right. Yeah. Huh.
Like this is like prayer.
Yeah.
Like this is like meditation. Like imagine, because we're just imagining here.
Hmm.
Imagine it swings the other way where it's just like this super sacred thing.
Yeah. Like a ritual made around your self
Ritual.
pleasure.
Yeah, ritual, man.
Mm.
Ritual for sure. Like think about if you were raised as it viewed as a ritual and sacred,
Right.
how different you think things are going to be when you're a teen and that energy is becoming really strong and
Hmm.
you're like getting into your 18, 20s and like instead of a world that's like, yeah, just bang everybody and get drunk, it's like this is some sacred ritual.
Yep.
Like
Yeah.
that's going to change things.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because that's basically how that book, The Fifth Sacred Thing, kind of goes, and it talks about how connected these folks are with their humanity and their divinity, because they're able to and allowed to explore their sexuality unabashed. And when we can explore our sexuality unabashed, we now know what consent really means and feels like, and when consent is taken from us or taken from somebody else, right? So it's when you're raised with that awareness and understanding, it allows all of the understanding of those emotions to come in, instead of you just kind of like hearing the tabooness of some of these emotions. No, you get to experience it because you're raised with.
And you presenting that just makes me realize, and I forget this at times. It's just like anyone on the path of sharing information and doing different healing modalities and the internal stuff. Anyone on the path focused on the internal stuff is just so needed in the world right now because we have, in my judgment, I'm going to use an ego measurement, but it's like we have a long time before that'll work
Yeah.
because there's so many injured people and wounded people and hurt people, and it's like that could totally be something that works in a healthy society.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, I often think I often don't value myself for what I do. And it's just like that possibility exists where a world's so healthy that we don't have to worry about like the demented kind of like twisted people ruining, like coming in and making it more traumatic or
Right.
whatever it is. It's just like, um, yeah, there's a lot of possibility for our species in this planet.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the potent tools on that path. And it's interesting because what I'm really being called to do is work with men in their own practice.
Mm.
Because then there's no worry about how it ripples into anyone else. It's just like as a man and your individual practice,
Yeah.
the way that you connect to yourself that way, and how does it become how does it become healing and growth instead of like shadowy, taboo, sneaky, like, weird energetics.
Yeah, yeah. And there is, it all does start with you, with us, the individual, right? Get your stuff
Right,
straight before you start permeating that stuff out there. And that doesn't mean that you have
right,
to get your stuff like 100%, right? But just
right,
start the work, right? Start the work. When you start your own work, it permeates out, right? You could have this idea of wanting to change the world, but if you're walking around kicking your dog, yelling at the mailman all day long, then that's not a fucking way to do it, right? Fix
right,
you, right? Find out why you're upset with the mailman and just kicked your dog, right? Stop that shit. Let that permeate throughout your household, throughout the neighborhood, throughout the community, throughout the state, throughout the fucking country, throughout the world. But let it start with you first, right? Don't try to fix the
right.
world if you're an asshole, right?
Yeah, man, it's that's one that I don't think can be heard enough times.
Yeah.
Um, like especially for us as any person that's in a role of facilitating or leading anyone in any way, the more people you facilitate and lead, the more people I facilitate and lead, the more that I have to be on that path,
Yep.
the more that I can't falter from that path of like of being connected to my energetics and what is going on in here.
Right.
I'm pointing at my mind, listeners, and uh yeah, it's no joke. I think when I became a coach, this it's the most internal work I've ever done.
Yeah.
It's like life didn't give me another option. It's like as soon as I signed up for that, I feel like I've been training for marathons of like internal work. I don't have a family. I don't have kids. I barely like, I was just like I had to just focus so much attention on myself. And I think that it is that responsibility that we carry is that if we want to share this information, and no, I don't want to bring it into some realm of perfection because that's not what I'm saying, but it's just like it's kind of this agreement
Right.
is how I feel. It's like this agreement that I'm gonna take care of this and work on this, and that is first and foremost that is my legacy. That is my ripple into the world. And then the work and the other things that I do, that comes next.
Right. That's interesting because to me, it almost sounds like your subconscious planted this opportunity in front of you to hold you accountable for the work it knows you need to do. And I think a lot about that with, so and I've shared this on the past, in the past, but, I've had, I've had suicidal thoughts in the past. I've never acted on them, but I've had them. Right. And I think a lot of us do. Right. But, when I start to think about my life in that kind of aspect and I think about how much I do love the life that I live, there are those moments of down moments, but I think
Totally.
subconsciously, I put things in my life to hold me accountable to be here, my kids,
Totally.
right? The loved ones in
Totally.
my life, right? So I have something to, when I get to those dark moments, my subconscious is like, but remember, you have two beautiful daughters, right? And it's like, shit, I do. Okay, cool, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, in that same kind of sense, this podcast that I host is that same
Cool.
accountability, right? I can't
Totally
be
is.
out
Totally
here
is.
talking to people like you, talking about men's work, talking about sexuality, talking about plant medicines, talking about all this beautiful healing work if I'm not embracing that path myself. And so in a way,
Right.
this podcast holds me accountable for the healing journey that I started years ago, to
You're
keep
making me
talking to
want to start a
people.
podcast.
Right. Hey man, I help you out. No worries.
I love
But
that. I
so
love
I
that,
think
dude.
our subconscious does that. It puts these things in
Yeah.
front of us to hold us accountable because it knows it's for our best, and maybe we're just not conscious enough to know that it's for our best. But there's something in us that's going to make us show up continuously, and then we'll figure it out that it's for our best.
And I do love giving credit to the subconscious, and I will stretch it out even further, and I'll say like our soul,
Yeah.
our like even further, our beyond our human. I think there's even that part that's like put these, put these things in place, these people at this time and these sufferings and this and that. It's like
Right.
it's all part of that too. So it's like a mixture of those amazing things to set us up to have this experience in the way that we do.
Yeah, there's a woman I was talking to the other day, and this is a thought experiment that I've been working with for a while, and I can honestly say it does help me, but it's taken me a while to get there. But I love the idea of reincarnation, the different aspects of reincarnation. But there's one of the ideas is that we our Atman, our self, our capital S self, chose this path of life for us to be in this current human existence, right? And so so in when I get into my shit, right, whether I've done it to myself or I found myself in some kind of shit, some depression, anxiety, some situation that I found myself in of like, what the fuck is this, right? The thing that really helps me now is to know that there was a bigger part of me that knew that I was going to face this and knew I could find my way through it,
Totally.
right? There's that bigger self that was like, okay, I'm going to choose for Adam to get in this kind of trouble or to have this kind of situation where he has to make this choice, whatever it is. But I know that he's going to be able to be strong enough and be committed enough to do this. And so, like, to me, that just there's this reassurance to me that I knew that I would be okay and that I knew that I would
Hmm.
be hard to do, but I would figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And there's a beauty in that to me, and it's taken me a while to really embrace that, but there is a beauty in that. So, like when I find myself in these positions of like, fuck, man, how did this just happen? Okay, back up. Why did you put yourself in this position? What lesson are you needing to learn now? What, bridge can you rebuild that you've burnt down? Whatever it is, right? But what's your next step? Sometimes it's all about the recovery, right? It's not about the play itself. It's about, oh shit, I fumbled. How do I pick this up and run with it now?
Hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Oh, well, man, I just could probably talk to you for another hour about this stuff, man.
Yeah,
But
I know.
I love the flowiness of the information that you have, how you tie it all together. You just have this beautiful way of presenting information that could be hard to grasp in a very approachable way, and it makes it to where
Thanks,
like
brother.
I want to learn it. It doesn't feel like a chore. And I love
Mm.
all of our conversations about this stuff. This is, you're one of my favorite people to talk to about work in general. Um,
Mm.
and
Same,
so,
same.
man, I appreciate you being on. Is there a kind of final
Yeah.
parting words you want to leave our guests with, or not to put you on the spot?
No, no, no. I just like my kind of teenager mind came in there, just like say something funny about sexuality or something. But I was just chuckling at that. You know, honestly, like, where am I at with all of this? It's like liberate yourself,
Hmm.
empower yourself, clear out the old, outdated messages that aren't yours, you know, so that there's an opportunity for you to experience it for yourself and learn through experience. It's like words and teachers share information, but us as the receivers of that information, we take that into the experiential practice and we find out if it's true for us, if we resonate with it, if it's a path that's similar for ours and like we resonate with it.
Hmm.
And so it's like for for the men listeners, it's like go into look at the way that look at the way that you are with self-pleasure. Are you in your mind? Are you just like super just blasting yourself with stimulation because your body's so numb and disassociated? Or like, can you be slow and kind and maybe treat yourself like you would a partner, like
Right.
loving and taking your time and not rushing to home base, you
Hmm.
know? Just observe, see what's going on and in the way that in the way that you are with your sexuality by yourself first.
Right.
There's so much to see there. We put we even put acts on when we bring in a partner. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go all slow and like, warm her up and like foreplay. And it's like we bring in another, and it's like we become a completely different person.
Right.
But when we're by ourselves, are we lighting candles?
Uh-huh.
Are we pulling out giving ourselves a back rub? Are we making a bubble bath? Like, is
Right.
any of that going on?
Yep.
If not, there's something to look at
Yeah.
because it's like it's become mechanical, it's become mental, it's
Hmm.
become more in the end of addiction or soothing. And there's just this world, I believe, waiting for each of us that is like this completely different way of existing and being. And it ripples out into everything else because it's the creative center. It's like the center that so much energy comes from that will ripple into the rest of our body and being. So observe yourself, learn, see what you see, and uh, open up to what else might be possible for you.
Hell yeah, brother. Ian, thank you so much, man. I always love I love our conversations, man. I look forward to chatting again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks as always for having me on.
Pleasure, brother. Thank you so much for spending time with Ian and I. Please check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with Ian or myself or ways to support the show. Obeisance and love. We'll see you next time.